Well, we have a fabulous show lined up for you. Think of everything to do with copper-faced jacks. Think of nurses and guards and the GAA, and you've got just everybody having a great time. It's a fabulous show, and we've got a brilliant cast.
It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's Copper-Faced Jacks the musical, written by the exceptionally talented Paul Howard. It's magical, it's brilliant, and the songs are fantastic, the dancing is fantastic. We've got an amazing cast, amazing director, and Carl Harper, production team. It couldn't be better. And you know, all the last 4 weeks, I must say, it does not feel like rehearsals. It just feels like we've all come together in a lovely little summer camp.
We kind of felt a bit of a responsibility as well, because it's such a beloved Irish institution. There's probably 20,000, 30,000 people in Ireland who met their life partners in Copper-Faced Jacks, and since we started doing the rehearsals, since I wrote the original script, we're hearing from them all the time, and they're coming to see the show because they say, you know, it's our 10th wedding anniversary, we met there and we're going to celebrate by going to see the show. So you realise when you hear those stories that you do have a responsibility, that people have an expectation of a certain kind of show, and you want to give it to them.
Paul Howard, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning. Great, yeah.
How's it going?
Great to be here. It's going great, yeah. We had 4 previews over the weekend, and they all went off well, you know. It's always nerve-wracking when you put a show on first, especially with comedy, if you've rehearsed it for 3 or 4 weeks, and there comes a point in the rehearsal process where it stops being funny, usually after about 4 days, because you're just repeating the same jokes over and over again. So then it's a relief when you finally put it in front of an audience and you hear laughter coming back at you.
Yeah, so that removes a bit of the tension for tonight. Tonight's kind of the official ceremonial opening, but for you, the real opening was that first night?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's the one where all the nerves are. I mean, of course you want tonight to go well, but it's the first time and the second time you put it in front of an audience that you are going to the theatre thinking, you know, is this funny at all?
Yeah.
Is this any good? Am I deluding myself here?
But they all laughed. At the right times.
They did, yeah. Well, not always at the right times, and because the funny thing about comedy is, you know, sometimes the thing you think is hilarious actually turns out to be the tumbleweed moment. In one of the Ross O'Carroll-Kelly shows 10 years ago, we had this storyline where Ross was in a bookies, and, you know, just to sort of keep the story up to date, there was Ronan O'Gara was involved. There was something in Lakeep about Ronan O'Gara allegedly having some kind of gambling debt. So we put somebody in a Munster jersey with a 10 on the back in the background in the bookies, thinking that this was, you know, this really topical joke. Tumbleweed. We lost it for the second night. We just said, get rid of it. It's not
right.
working.
Okay.
So you never really know, you know.
So you're changing the show, like you're actively producing still as the show goes on, depending on.
Not with this. I mean, because the actors in this have so much to master. You know, they've got lines to remember, they've got jokes to deliver, they've got you know, choreography, and they've got songs to sing. Yeah. That you can't suddenly say, do you think you could put this line in there? It just doesn't work like that. They have their cues, and you have to sort of keep them constant.
Ross O'Carroll-Kelly wasn't really, when it was produced for stage, wasn't really a musical. You did obviously do a musical, which was did it see the light of day? Did it have one performance? Did Anglo the musical?
No, actually, Anglo the musical, despite its troubles, had a full run in the Bogos Energy Theatre for 2 weeks, and then returned for a remount.
Right.
But I mean, it was much trouble. I mean, I didn't think after the first preview, I really thought we were going to the High Court the following day to argue against it being pulled. But I didn't think there was going to be a second performance.
Okay,
because
right.
We had the Director of Public Prosecutions. It's the first time it's ever happened to me. I'm sure it's the first time it's ever happened in Irish theatre that the Director of Public Prosecutions gave me rewrite notes the night before we opened. And rewrites of 14 scenes, you know. You can't say that, you can't say that, you cannot definitely sing that. And so I mean, we got the show on, but I mean, I remember being there at the first preview and there were solicitors in front of me writing all the jokes down in yellow legal pads, and that was a new experience.
Then after the jokes?
One of them was laughing actually as he was writing them down, and I didn't know whether he was laughing because he was thinking of his fee or because he was thinking of what was going to happen in court, how the judge was going to hear this the next day if they went for a sort of contempt of court order. But miraculously, they, you know, it went ahead, and they pulled back from their threat to stop the show.
Okay, so this is because I wasn't sure then. Obviously, musicals is a completely different experience to trying to write a one-man play or a play itself. So, are you musical? Do you like sit in the...
I'm not. Like, I mean, I love music. I mean, I have since I was a kid. I just listened to music all the time, and to me, a day without music is a day without joy. But I'm not. You know, I don't wake up in the middle of the night with tunes in my head that I have to write down. So with this, I mean, I wrote lyrics, and Paul Woodfull and Dave McCune wrote the music for the lyrics. So I would have an idea for a song, and I would ring them and say, this is the hook, like this is the chorus, and they would send me maybe an idea for a verse.
Okay.
Quite often when I was writing had actually already been written. You know, I would sort of ring them and say, I've got, and I'd hum what I'd written, and they would say, that's Sunset Boulevard. Like, somebody's already written that. Andrew Lloyd Webber got there before you. So my tunes tended to be in my head from what I knew, you know, and there's no original composition in my head at all.
Tell us the story, because it does involve Dublin and Kerry, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean the star of the show, I suppose, is Gino Wiles, who's the captain of the Dublin football team and a slightly wayward character. He's not based on anybody, any real life character. And a girl called Nolina Gerald, who is from Cahersivey in County Kerry. And she comes to Dublin to realise her lifelong dream of working in the claims department of the VHI. So it's an everyday story, you could say. And she's living in a bedsit on Harcourt Street, and one night she hears the strains of Maniac 2000 coming across the road from Copperface Jacks, and she goes across the road to ask them to turn the music down. And when she goes in, she bumps into Gino Wiles, and they fall in love. So it's kind of a little bit like, it's a kind of West Side Story type affair, you know, but with Dubs and Kerry people
instead of Jets and Sharks.
Yeah, and it's their efforts to sort of make this love work despite their cultural differences and the language barrier between Kerry and Dublin people.
Owen famously went into Coppers to charge his phone one time. So,
I did, yeah. Well, you know, thanks for bringing that one up, Jerry. They've got it all in Coppers, really, including, you know, the specific sort of Android charger I was looking for at that particular moment in time. So it's an iconic place, you know. It's even if you're going in to not get a drink or you know, to not meet somebody from a different county. I mean, like, phone charges are plenty in there, which is the main thing. But like, my question is, like, the idea for this. I mean, were you in there yourself and you were like, this would make a perfect musical?
Yeah, I mean, I was in there a lot, like, you know, but when I was a younger man, and I mean, I was there the night when Mark Kennedy and Phil Babb had their incident. And
were you with them in that party?
No, I wasn't. I mean, I was kind of, but I was leaving just around the time when they were doing their Starsky and Hutch act on a car outside, which happened to be a Garda car. And I suppose on Harcourt Street, if you're outside Copperface Jacks, the chances are it's going to be a Garda car. Yeah. And I can't remember which one was on top, but a band Garda sort of looked out and looked up like that. And so I'd say it was the easiest collar they ever got in their lives, the Gardaí on Harcourt Street.
Mark Kennedy should have known better. Phil Babb at least doesn't really get the whole, it's called Coppers because it's owned by a guard, run for the guards. The guards drink there, and that's the biggest Garda station in the country. Mark Kennedy should have known that, right?
But it's also, when you think back on that, it's a snapshot of a completely different time, a more innocent time, you might say. But the fact that you could break curfew in those days before a big World Cup match and go to the biggest nightclub in the country with an expectation that it might not get out. I mean, this is obviously pre-social media, pre-mobile phones, where everyone now is a paparazzo, a potential paparazzo. That this is just sort of 17 years ago, that you could actually go to the biggest nightclub in Ireland and it would just be a rumour that you were ever there, that you could always deny.
No one could ever prove it.
So yeah, I was there that night, and actually I was in the Sunday Tribune at the time, and we had an editorial conference the next day, and it was all talk about this incident that happened in Copperface Jacks the night before, and I couldn't declare that I had seen it.
Oh, no way!
I didn't want them to know that I'd been in Copperface Jacks the night before, because I was kind of technically breaking curfew as well. I certainly should have been out.
So you were sitting on a giant scoop, and it was like,
yeah.
No,
I witnessed to the whole thing.
Yeah, right. Wow. And you were like, no, I'm not saying anything. That's mad.
That's how it went. Yeah.
And here it is now. You're writing a musical about it.
Yeah.
It definitely has undergone this kind of cultural shift from like, oh God, no one ever goes there or admits to going there, to everybody has to go there.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's the kind of place where nobody kind of consciously decides at the start of the night, it's this place, and then we're finishing in Copperface Jack's. You know, it's always a place that you end up rather than a place you sort of consciously set out to go to, or a place where the next day you'll say, I got dragged to Copperface Jack's last night. You know, you always shift the blame onto somebody else, you know. But I think there's definitely been a change in perception since Brian Cullen lifted the Sam Maguire and said, I'll see you all in coppers. Because I think up until that point, it was seen very much as a culty club.
Yeah.
You know, that it was, you know, people like our character, Nolene Gerald, who comes to Dublin and is working in the VHI and maybe feels kind of lonely for home and knows if she goes to Coppers, it's like a big GAA club disco, essentially, but with slow sets and dodgy chat-up lines. But I think the Brian Cullen thing made it a sort of a club for everybody, you know, and brought it to that kind of national media attention for the first time since Bill Babb and Mark Kennedy.
Yeah, it was a kind of a cultural, okay, there you go, off you go, it's grand.
Yeah.
The kind of transition from like GAA only club to kind of wide sporting world club is also very interesting. Like I can remember being in there after David Alaba scored that wonder goal in the Aviva and Andreas Weimann was like drinking inside in Coppers, and I was like, this has come some way, this place, that the Austrian national team are thinking to themselves, Coppers it is, or I got dragged to Coppers.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's kind of got an international dimension to it now as well, you know, that there was so during the course of doing the research for it, I discovered there was an American woman who has the coordinates of Copperface Jack's tattooed on her back, the exact latitude and longitude.
Happened there.
Yeah, you would wonder, wouldn't you? But it clearly made an impression on her. But it is kind of it's internationally famous in the sense that people from abroad who come here and experience it go home and say, you know, maybe with a sort of look of trauma about them, I went to this club called Copperface Jack's, because I've tried to explain it to people from abroad, you know, and I sort of say, you know, they still play Cotton Eye Joe.
Yeah.
Like that's the big one. Like, you know, they still play Cotton Eye Joe. They play the anthem at the end. It's just the most appalling chat-up lines you'll ever hear in your life. Floor-filling songs, and you know, everybody the next day says, you know,
what a great night.
I didn't go there. You know, I just ended up there.
Yeah.
I wonder, is there like a duty of care on Irish people? Because like we've all been encountered by an American tourist somewhere near Harcourt Street and it's like, where would you advise as a club? And you kind of look to your mate and you're like, shall we suggest Coppers? And ultimately there is a duty of care on Irish people to go to this place where it's not just a nightclub, it's a state of mind.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. And it's a state of mind, I think, that lasts for about 3 days afterwards, you know? I mean, I know when I go, Cotton Eye Joe is in my head for 3 days afterwards. And that's kind of what we wanted to do with the musical. And I think that's why it made it such a good fit for the musical, because that's exactly what you want people to feel when they see musical theatre. You know, you want them leaving with these tunes in their head and just feeling like they've had a lot of laughs and a good night out.
We did a birthday party for Coppers a couple of years back, and the guest list was so easy to fill because Carl Jackson just rang people up who he knew through the years, and like, so people who wouldn't normally come and speak came and spoke and were very given of their time. It was pretty amazing. It was like everybody at some point has passed through and kind of has a story about it.
And there's so much goodwill towards it as well, you know, because I think it has happy associations for so many people. And Cathal, it's funny because when we first broached the idea of the musical, I think Cathal was a bit bewildered. I think he just couldn't get his head around the fact that we wanted to write a musical about his club. And but he sort of trusted us, you know, and he said, well, you know, I'd like to hear it before it goes on. That's the only thing. I want to hear it before it goes on the stage. So he came to the reading, and we had the reading around the corner in the Gaiety Theatre it must be about 8 weeks ago now, and he said, can I bring some friends with me? And, you know, they're just sort of pals of his who could tell him, you're fine, you know, it's grand.
Yeah.
And anyway, Pillar Caffrey walked in. And, you know, I kind of remember Pillar from my own days as a sports journalist. And he stood at the back along with all of Cathal Jackson's friends, who I couldn't help but notice were all guards, or they all certainly looked like guards. So we had a sort of table read, and there was about 40 people in the room, and the actors were really nervous because they kind of felt like people are, this is really intense. And I was nervous, and I sort of had my head down, and I didn't want to look up because there was a lot of jokes about guards in it, and I thought, is it safe to look up? And I looked up, and I saw Pillar and Cahill, and I just saw red faces and shoulders going up and down, and that was when my shoulders dropped, and I knew I could relax. Yeah.
I do want to talk to you about the World Cup.
Yes.
Tonight, it's your least favourite team who are up against France. And here's the thing about Twitter: we get to keep a record of this. So
I deleted that.
Are Belgium still the tournament favourites of every man between the ages of 25 and 45 who watches 7 or 8 Premier League matches a year and is part of the Office Fantasy Football competition, or is it another team now?
Yeah.
The kind of man who would tip Belgium to win the World Cup thinks nothing of wearing shoes without socks, is always thinking about doing a triathlon, and turns up at your summer barbecue with his own Wagyu fillet steak. Right.
Okay. I was hacked, actually. Well, I stand by both of those comments. That's a comment about Belgian fans rather than the Belgian
team itself.
The Belgian team itself. But I think they will lose tonight.
Well, that's the irony of it, that Roberto Martinez would definitely bring his own Wagyu fillet steak to a barbecue.
He definitely would, wouldn't he?
Yeah. Strikes me as that type of person.
Yeah, and he'd have some kind of sauce to put on it, and he wouldn't share the recipe with anyone, and he'd just keep it for himself as well.
Martinez?
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah, he's that type.
This is the last one, though. In all seriousness, though, why do people keep referring to Belgium golden generation? We're talking about 3, maybe 4 players, aren't we?
I did think I deleted that one. Look, because it's Belgium, it's a small country, its population is roughly the same as ours. I think is a bit smaller than ours.
Yeah.
So it is a golden generation in the context of the size of the country. But they have been punching way below their weight at major tournaments up until now, and even in this tournament, they've turned it on. They were 2-0 down against Japan. And they only won the match when Fellaini came on and they got physical, and the Japanese just couldn't live with them. They were impressive against Brazil in the first half, but I don't know. I still have doubts about them. I think France will beat them.
Isn't that the thing about international football, though? None of the teams are actually really good. They just have some good players, and if you can get them for 65 minutes in a match to do the same thing,
to get them to play like a club side for 3 weeks, that's the secret. 4 weeks, that's the secret of tournament football now. I definitely noticed. I've watched most of this tournament, and I'm pining for the Champions League watching it, because the football. People saying it's a great tournament. I don't think it's a tournament to compare with France '98 or Spain '82. I think it's just a good tournament. There's been some memorable matches. There's been some shockingly bad matches, and sometimes they were the matches you expected to be good matches.
Yeah. See, I don't know. I kind of have reached the point where the Champions League games are so bloodless for so long until it gets to the knockout stages that it's really only sometimes the group stages. Like 2 seasons or 3 seasons ago, the group stages was really good because some of the good teams went out.
Yeah.
But then the knockout stages were crap because the good teams were out. It was that kind of.
The problem is you need a third team in every group, don't you? It's like at the Rugby World Cup, the way there's always one group has 3
and that's it.
Potential quarterfinalists in it. But if you don't have that, you get what you had with the England-Belgium group. But having said that, there has been excitement, but a lot of it has been because teams have underperformed. When you look at Spain,
Brazil, even.
Argentina, Brazil, Germany, there's been a levelling off, but I think it's a levelling off not because the traditionally weaker teams are getting better. I think the stronger teams just aren't playing as you expect them to, but also they're not playing to the standard they would in the Champions League.
And I think maybe the Champions League is so high because every player is good and they have a replacement who's just as good because the amount of money that they have.
Yeah.
That the standard is way higher than international football now, whereas the standard used to be fairly close to each other.
Yeah, and if you look at the benches as well, the teams that the players that teams can bring off the benches in the World Cup is just nothing like the Champions League.
Tell us about this guy.
Oh, this is Naranjiso. Well, Spain '82 was the was the first World Cup that really got me. You know, I was 11, and I saw somebody saying the other day, the best World Cup ever is always the one you watched when you were 11 years of age. And for me, it was Spain '82. And this guy, I paid £2 for him in the newsagents in Ballybrack Shopping Centre, and
not cheap at the time.
£2 was a lot of money in those days, you know. He's lived in my attic for the last sort of 15 or 16 years, and I hadn't seen him until I went looking for some old autograph books recently that I had when I was a kid, like looking for just sort of football autographs I got as a child. And he was in the box, and I took him out, and I said, you know, what am I going to do with them? I thought, why not give them to the Off the Ball Museum? You know?
We're very, very grateful for it.
There was a pen in it originally, and the idea was when you put the pen in there, he kind of bounced up and down like that.
Like the stadium, the people in the stadium when a goal gets scored.
Yeah, and before its time, because this is 1982. And you know, I think Naranjito was one of the best. Definitely one of the best World Cup mascots.
I mean, I love PK because '86 is my first World Cup. So,
right, okay. Yeah.
But I mean, so this is like, wow, that's it, you know.
Yeah.
It's an artifact. Who was in the autograph books?
Well, I had like some kind of weird ones. Like I had Batista, who was the Uruguayan player who was sent off after 36 seconds against Scotland.
Wow.
And Bossio. So Uruguay played Ireland that February, I think it was, just before the World Cup. So I had a lot of those autographs. A lot of the Brazil team that came here in 1987, like Josimar, Carlos, Mirandinha. Do you remember Mirandinha?
Newcastle.
And so I had a lot of those. A lot of Irish players: Mick McCarthy, Niall Quinn, Liam Brady. You know. So me and my friends used to sort of, when Ireland played at Lansdowne Road, would wait. They had to walk this sort of gauntlet between the dressing rooms and the car park to get to the bus, and it was about the length of a football pitch,
right.
And you had those 100 yards
to get people
to get them to sign autographs, and most of them did. You know, they were very decent. And
if you're getting Niall Quinn's, you're roughly the same age as Niall Quinn, right?
No. Probably about, I think, about 4 years.
That's just
younger.
that kind of key.
Yeah. So
14.
I was kind of 15 and he was 19 or 20. But I have a photograph of me standing next to Niall Quinn, and I'm sort of up to his belly button, and I've no glasses on, and I had a squint in my eye at the time, and it's just a strange. I should give it to you, so I should have brought it today. But Niall Quinn is huge, and he's got this enormous bushy hair. He kind of looks like, you know, he should be in Queen or something, and then I'm standing beside him like this with a wonky eye. It's quite funny, but you have to see it.
It doesn't sound like you miss being a sports journalist at all, except maybe during times like where it's the World Cup. There's like 2 weeks maybe where you're thinking, I wouldn't mind covering this, but then actually...
Yeah. I mean, the only World Cup I covered as a sports journalist was 2002, and it was hell. You know, I don't remember... you know, I just remember being not a lot of football matches, just a lot of press conferences and a lot of training sessions. So it was all the post-Saipan stuff.
Yeah.
I think I was at 6 matches in the whole World Cup, which is just a terrible shame looking back. But like I said, we were sort of sitting, you know, there was sitting at press conferences wondering, is Roy Keane coming back? Then he wasn't coming back, then he maybe was, and then he wasn't again. And that was my experience of it. And but yeah, looking at it from the outside, looking at a tournament like this, I do think, I would love to be there.
But no pangs to ever get back into the...
I think I'm out of it too long now, you know. I'm that's how I feel. I mean, I'm sort of 15 years since I was a full-time sports writer, maybe 14 years, and the business has just changed so much. You know, it's you know, I certainly wouldn't be that type of journalist that I was, which was this sort of chin stroking for 3 days and then writing a piece for the Sunday paper. I would really have to work. But I have to say as well, you know, watching the lead into the Tour de France as well, and I am reminded of one of the reasons I wanted to stop writing about sport was that I had ceased to believe in it anymore, and a lot of it, and I just, you know, I just couldn't sell a lot of the myths to people anymore, and it just killed me to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the constant. It's increasingly hard to believe that any of the sport you watch, especially football, is in any way real.
Yeah, and it's creeping in. I notice a lot of the pundits on television, they use the word energetic as a euphemism for teams they suspect are doping, and
Don't get tired,
they
this
say they
team.
took this extraordinary energy entering into the final 10 minutes of this team. And, I have my suspicions about quite a few teams over the last sort of 10 years or so. I suspect some of them were doping, but it's right the way through sport now, and the Serena Williams thing, the Froome thing and the Tour de France, even in rugby now, where a positive drug test, or as they call it, an adverse analytical finding, it need not necessarily end somebody's career. It's not like cheating in golf where it carries on. It's almost like a technical thing.
It's a mistake.
Yeah, and it happened in the past.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of an amorality, I think, has crept into it. And I think, it kills me to say it, I think people genuinely don't care anymore about doping in sport. I care about it. It really, really bothers me.
Yeah.
I don't think punters care that much anymore.
They almost care the opposite way, where a journalist who is trying to maintain their own integrity by writing the right story or covering the real story at the heart of issues is just getting mountains and mountains and mountains of abuse. Particularly with Twitter and social media, it is just allowing that to be a conduit of abuse, essentially. And ultimately, if you're towing the party line, you're going to be more successful. You're probably going to be richer anyway.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, sport is a spectacle. First and foremost, it's a spectacle, and it's increasingly become, it is a television spectacle mostly.
Yeah.
And there are stories that people just aren't prepared to hear. They don't want to. It's actually quite boring. I mean, I remember towards the end of my career as a sports journalist, I went to cover the Athens Olympics, and I had about 16 books with me. And I think 14 of them were about drugs.
Yeah.
And I could pronounce drug names that were like 14 syllables long without even stopping, so that was me, and I was sort of obsessed with that stuff. But at the end, I kind of felt people don't want to hear this anymore, and people, great people like Paul Kimmage, great journalists, who are still writing about this, are increasingly being sort of pushed to the edges, like they're being treated like they're cranks or something.
Yeah,
and
we see it all the time. Like, if we do a story on doping, the response is like, "Oh, keep going," from some people, and then it's like, "Oh my God, this stuff again." And we feel a little bit like that because, like, you can decide you have to engage with each separate drug scandal from the start, because otherwise you're like, "What was the jiffy bag part of that story again? What was in that? Why could they not have got that? What is Flumicil?" It becomes this kind of burden to do it. And like, the only reason that we keep doing it is because a kid died taking steroids last week. And that's literally the only reason that I can find anymore that's worthwhile continuing to. Drugs are really dangerous if you don't.
And then you had this space in the early 90s of professional cyclists who were taking EPO, and it was the early days of EPO, and their hearts stopped, and this is what you have to remember when you're talking about doping, that usually the athlete is the worst judge in the world of how much is enough and how much is too much, because athletes will dope to win, even if it means they're going to die. That's just a fact, and we've seen so many examples of that in the past. But for me, I just found it really, really difficult to sort of sell the myths of a lot of these sports. When you're writing about sport, because a lot of sports coverage is calendar driven, you do become part of the promotion to a certain extent. That there's an All-Ireland, say there's an All-Ireland semi-final this weekend, you're covering the All-Ireland semi-final, and your coverage is essentially part of the promotion. People pick up the paper and say, "Oh, the hurlers are playing in Croke Park this weekend, I must go and see that." And the temptation to be not critical is always there, and especially when people tell you that they're bored of you writing about drugs.
To what extent can a difficulty arise where, like, you speak about like your favourite mascots, you speak about like getting autographs of the Irish team, the patriotism that we're all brought up in as sports fans as kids, and to try and park that for one moment and not be a cheerleader for the country? I'm sure, like being at Olympics, that's a particular difficulty that one might have.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I didn't cover the 96 Olympics, which I think was the really, really difficult one. I covered it from here, which was the Michelle Smith-De Bruyne case. And it was, in a way, it was much easier to cover from here because I was doing just the sort of pavement pounding reportage. You know, I was sort of making phone calls, and I went to Holland to sort of check out Eric De Bruyne's background and things like that. But I don't know how I would have been if I'd been in the arena when she won her medals. I mean, I'd like to think that I would have written critically, or I would sort of question the validity of her achievements, but you don't know, you know, until you're there. And you know, people talk about the pressure at the time, you know, to kind of say what a great news story, what a good story it was for the country. And it's true, it was there, you know, and anybody who wrote critically about Michelle did cop flack for it, you know. It was the same when the Tour de France came to Ireland as well, which was, I think, the following year. Nobody wanted to hear that drugs were going to be brought to Ireland for the event.
It's 20 years ago this week, actually.
Yeah, 98, yeah.
98, yeah. I mean, the reality was, I mean, that if you kind of knew anything about cycling and the history of cycling, that drugs were going to be put in the boot of a car and taken on a ferry to Ireland for that event.
Luckily, they caught them on the way out.
And they caught them and they didn't catch them here, you know. So that was a win for us. Yeah.
Look, you've been really good with your time. Is football coming home to finish this?
You know, I think England have a really good chance of winning it, and you know, I'm saying that as somebody who hasn't actually been that impressed by England. You know, I know they've gone to a back three, and supposedly they've been liberated tactically, but they actually haven't produced that much good football. You know, a lot of set pieces, which is a feature of this World Cup. You know, a lot of set piece goals. You know, a lot of players have disappointed, like Dele Alli, Raheem Sterling. Their best player after Harry Kane is the goalkeeper, you know. But I just think I have a kind of sense that it might come good for them. But we don't know anything about them. It's amazing. I've never seen the team get to the semi-finals and to be so
unknown.
Unknown and
there'll be loads
anonymous.
of Players Tribune pieces to come, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's playing. It's coming home in the background there. Coppers the Musical is coming home tonight. So,
yes.
And for how long is the run?
The run is it's 4.5 weeks until the 12th of August.
Okay, so if anybody wants tickets, it sounds great. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Paul, congratulations.
Thanks, Jared.